Greetings and welcome to the ROI Clear podcast. My name is Ray Hightower, and today we are honored to have as our guest Dr. Kevin Taylor. Dr. Kevin Taylor is a professor of business, and he is an entrepreneur with a successful exit in the technology space. He's a United States Navy veteran. He's a business leader. He has many hats, many experiences in his life, and we're going to talk to him about some of those today. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guest, Dr. Kevin Taylor. Kevin, welcome to the ROI Clear podcast.
Ray, good to see you. It's really nice to be on here with you. I've been watching your podcast for a while, and I'm very, very pleased that you invited me on to discuss entrepreneurship, one of my favorite topics.
Wonderful. Well, yeah, we're glad to have you here. And for those who don't know who Kevin Taylor is, he and I met in Chicago. We were both running technology companies in Chicago. He was running a software company called Optiva that he and his partners built up from scratch. They grew it, and they eventually sold it to Groupon. And I really admired the way you did what you did with that company. You hired some amazingly talented people just across the board, and you did that really well. Our first experience together, the first business interaction that you and I had together was when I was running a conference in Chicago called Windy City Rails. And for the very first Windy City Rails, it was all about the Ruby on Rails framework for web application development. I came to you and I said, hey, what would you want to see if you decided to sponsor a conference in this technology? And Rails was very central to what you were doing with your company with Optiva. What would you want to see? And of all the people that I asked that question, I asked that same question of other CEOs in the area, other technology CEOs. Your answer was the most detailed and clear, and it very much became our sponsor package. It became the framework for our sponsorship package that year. So I don't know if I ever told you that story, but thank you for that. And we grew that conference. We ran that for 10 years. So it was wonderful having you there in our first year. And
Yeah,
so grateful to
it was a great community that you and your associates had built in Chicago. Windy City Rails was an institution for anyone in the Rails community. Yeah, it's funny because when I launched Optiva, it was the idea for it was that, and this was in 2005, was that we would have a small kind of elite cadre of Uber programmers who would kind of parachute in behind enemy lines and embed themselves into software teams and help kind of build a guerrilla force of software developers within a organization, whether it's Sears or whether it's NASA or whatever.
yeah.
In general, right, like software development in big corporations, it's pretty, it's pretty slow moving, and there's not a lot of innovative methods being used in most of those large corporations, right? And so we wanted to kind of bring our expertise onto these teams, but one of my first lessons in entrepreneurship was that was not what the market was asking for. I started the company with that vision, but listen, when I went to sales meetings, Uber programmers parachuting in was not on the list of customer demands, right? What they wanted solid teams of people who could get software written professionally very quickly to basically add additional pipeline of productivity. And so that's the direction we went after kind of doing those initial customer sales calls.
I love that you're sharing that experience. You had one idea of what Optiva was going to be. And when you had your interactions with the customer, they had another idea. And of course, if you're a good entrepreneur, the customer always wins because they're the ones with the checkbook, right? So you listened to what they said and you pivoted. You could have been a hard-headed, egomaniac or whatever and said, no, no, we're going to parachute in behind enemy lines and be this uber group of developers, and you listened and you adjusted.
Yes, and if I hadn't adjusted, I would probably still be parachuting in behind enemy lines, but I would be by myself, maybe one or two other, kind of hard-headed people also, right? But there wouldn't be a lot of customer demand, and so so Optiva was fairly successful, and it was, and as you mentioned, we built a great team of very strong, passionate software developers, right? Around 50 people over 6 years. And it was because there was customer demand for it that gave us the gunpowder to go out and hire all these great people and build a really cool, innovative engineering culture.
I love your military metaphors. Let's go back to
Absolutely.
the military, because we mentioned in passing that you're a United States Navy vet. Thank you for that. Also, I'm very much grateful to anyone who served in the military. As I see it, the military provides a shield behind which the rest of us can do business. So grateful to you for that. Tell
Thank
us
you.
a little bit about, how did you decide to go into the military? What went into that decision? And we're going to walk through that experience and then go into Optiva and then what you're doing now. So how
Sure.
did you
Yeah.
decide to go into that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So grew up on military bases. My father was in the Air Force, retired Air Force. So it was almost predetermined that that was kind of my path. So right out of high school, signed up with my best friend
Yes.
for the Navy, go see the world.
Yes.
Yeah, ended up on a couple of submarines that didn't really pull into foreign ports very often, so didn't see much of the world other than from 60 feet below the ocean.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, it was a good time to experience something very unique. Grew up a lot, kind of developed my interest in things that are analytical and technology based. Kind of came from those experiences, and then I took that into college and actually studied economics in college, but
Hmm.
did a lot of computer science course, and uh, yeah, then morphed into career in my career in technology.
Yes. All right. So you're in the Navy, subs 60 feet below the surface of the water, got to know your fellow shipmates together. What are some things that you learned in the Navy that you would say are serving you well today, or served you during your leadership of Optiva?
Sure, yeah. I mean, there's so much. I was a petty officer, so I was an enlisted person, but at 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, I had tremendous amounts of responsibility. On a ship of, one ship had a crew of 160, another had a crew of 250 people, and
Hmm.
as an 18 or 19-year-old, instead of hanging out at a frat house doing whatever frat house guys do. I
Hmm.
was fixing electronic equipment. I was,
Yes.
standing watches, on the ship, working, sometimes 24/7. So it was, I think being in that environment of high responsibility at such a young age creates a strong impression, right?
Hmm.
In academia speak, they have something called um, uh, the Big Five personality profile, and so
Hmm.
they can basically encapsulate someone's personality through these five measurements of extroversion, agreeableness, openness to change, neuroticism, and then conscientiousness. So this is how we kind of measure personality. And conscientiousness is the measurement of how important it is for you not to let people down.
Hmm. Hmm.
And that and my conscientiousness measurement is pretty high, and I
Yes.
really attribute that to my time on that submarine, because in high school it was very low. Like
Yeah. Okay. Yes.
I was fine letting teachers down and letting my parents down, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when I got onto that ship and I had so much responsibility, it really raised up my conscientiousness score. Conscientiousness, by the way, is that and extroversion are the two traits that are most aligned with successful entrepreneurship also
Hmm.
in the academic literature. So, so I think that however you get that conscientiousness, whether it's, playing hardcore sports, growing up, or, boy, I know you're big into Boy Scouts,
Yes.
that can definitely increase people's conscientiousness, but it's important if you want to be a successful entrepreneur.
That's fascinating. You're connecting the dots there between your experience in high school, and you can look back and look at yourself in high school and look at your level of conscientiousness then. I don't know where your level of extroversion was, but
Pretty low.
okay, all right,
Pretty low,
okay.
yeah.
All right. And
Yeah.
then in the Navy, you certainly advanced in both of those, in conscientiousness and extroversion. You said there was like 120 people on the ship. Should I say
But
ship
yeah,
or boat? What is the proper
yeah.
term? I don't want.
Well, like technically they're ships, but colloquially they we call them boats.
Okay, got it,
Yeah.
got it. I want to make sure. I don't want
Yes.
any Navy vets to roast me in the comments. So
Yeah.
what we have there?
Do not call an aircraft carrier a boat. But submarines you can call boats.
Okay, very good. Okay, there we go. There we go. So that upped your conscientiousness because you had over 100 people depending on you. You were a petty
Yeah.
officer, as you said. You were an enlisted man in a position of leadership, and there were things you had to get done, either repairing equipment or other things, or perhaps mentoring others in the repair of equipment too, as a leader, certainly. So that
Right.
that boosted you there. Wonderful. So after the Navy, you went to college, you studied economics, and you also took some computer science courses. Tell us a little bit about that. How did you decide to choose? What made you choose economics over computer science? You could have been majored in computer science and taken some economics courses, or vice versa. What made you lean one way or the other?
Absolutely. Yeah, I started programming when I was in middle school.
Hmm.
My father worked at Bell Labs, which back in the 1980s, Bell Labs was like the Google, of
Yes.
that time. They were publishing papers, they were creating the technology that others were building on, and so I had access to computers, back then, and learned how to program. So when I went to college, I was like, well, I'll probably study computer science. But I took my first econ class and fell in love with the
Wow.
analytical aspect of it. And
Yes.
it just made so much sense to me, right? And so I declared economics major. Of course, I was still programming. I had
Hmm.
been programming, for 10 years at that point. And so I did take some computer science courses when I had the opportunity to. But yeah, I fell in love with the analytical nature of economics, and worked in the options industry, the futures and options industry out of college. So I
Wow.
traded wheat futures, wheat options, and then uh, I I kind of went back. I was like, well, this isn't really going anywhere. Being in Chicago, futures and options is a big industry in
Hmm.
Chicago, but
Hmm.
it's very tough to make a long-term living in that
Hmm.
industry. So I switched, went and got my first full-time programming job as a Java developer. This was in
Yes.
2000. I took a little kind of like a 10-week boot camp course on Java programming. Got my
Hmm.
first job at honesty.com, which
Yes.
which was their whole business was putting little page counters on eBay pages, because in the year 2000, eBay sellers had no idea who who was visiting their website. And so it was
Sure.
basically a little page counter and traffic stats for eBay sellers. And so that was my first crack at being a full-time developer.
Wow. So all throughout, it seems that at every point in your life, you're looking around for opportunities. If you know what you need in order to move forward, you'll move forward. But if you don't, like you knew you needed to learn Java, you immersed yourself in that 10-week
Mhm.
program, acquired the skills that you needed, added that to the skills you already had, and there you are at honesty.com.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, you really hit um, hit the nail on the head with that, because learning is basically the through line through my entire career. Since
Mhm.
leaving high school, I'm constantly trying to learn and acquire new skills, learn new areas of whether it's philosophy, culture, science, economics, technology. I'm constantly trying to
Yes.
learn, to educate myself, and also to acquire new skills,
Right.
right? And that's enabled me to not only start companies but also evaluate companies when I'm an angel investor,
Hmm.
or even to change careers, right? From options trader to programmer
Yes.
to to CEO to CTO to professor, right? So I'm making these kind of lateral moves through my career, and the moves aren't completely orthogonal, right?
Hmm.
It's like I'm moving into kind of adjacent areas so I can kind
Yes.
of build on my previous experience. I'm not starting from scratch, but I'm also having to acquire significant new skills and understandings.
Yeah. You're reminding me of something Charlie Munger used to say. He talked about if you want to develop an area of expertise, make sure it's small and tightly defined, like not big and fuzzy. And if you are going to go into another area, you want to make sure it's adjacent to something you already have so you can build on it. So each layer
Absolutely.
built on the experiences you had before. There you
That's
go.
I think that's important, right? Because then you start to build this very a deep understanding of kind of the foundations of whatever fields you're in, right? If you're moving
Hmm.
around between adjacent fields, like when I went back to get my doctorate in 2018, that's kind of a big decision, and I have
Hmm.
interests outside of entrepreneurship, right?
Yes.
And I could have said, I'm going to go get a doctorate in, history, right? And
Right.
become a
Right.
history professor. But it's like, well,
Hmm.
then I'm literally starting from scratch, other than,
Yes.
the kind of popular books I read, but I would have been starting absolutely from scratch, right? And so when I decided I really want to move into academia and be a full-time professor, it was like, okay, let's pick a field where, again, it's kind of adjacent to my previous experiences.
Right. Yes, I see them. Steve Jobs says you can't connect the dots going forward, but you can connect them going backwards. So I'm thinking about what you just said and connecting your dots going backwards. So there we go.
Yeah.
So you're at honesty.com, you're a Java developer, you've got skills there. You're doing what Google Analytics does before Google Analytics existed. You know, those guys may have still been in the garage. Well, no, 2000, they were out of the garage, but they still didn't have Google Analytics,
Barely.
right?
Yes,
Yeah, barely,
barely.
right? They were
Right.
barely out of the garage, right?
Yeah.
So somewhere in there between 2000 and 2005, you made a decision to launch Optiva. Can you walk us through that process?
Yeah, yeah. So of course there was the big dot-com crash in 2000, 2001. And I was working as at the time I was working as a software consultant. So I was moving around to different clients, helping them build their software. And for Ray, you probably remember at that time, after 2001, basically there was no work left, right?
Yes,
All the
yes.
clients were firing consultants, they were laying off their staff. And I was sitting at I was a consultant working at a company called The Pampered Chef
Mm-hmm.
with a team of about 6 other consultants. And they said, okay, they brought me in and said, we're letting go all the consultants.
Mm.
We'd like to offer you a full-time position here. And I said, well, I really like consulting, so I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
stick with that. And then I called up my boss at the consulting company. I'm like, hey, they're letting us go here. What's the next client? So
Yeah.
naively, I'm like, so who's the next client you're going to send me to? And he's like, well, I got some bad news for you.
Wow. Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know, uh, so I went back to the Pampered Chef, and they did end up hiring me full time. So I worked there for a number of years, building really, really cool internally facing, but also consumer facing software, both web based and in rich client software. And
Mm-hmm.
but then at some point when the economy started to pick up again in 2004, I saw all of a sudden the project pipeline expanded, and the Pampered
Mm-hmm.
Chef didn't have enough people to, service all the projects. And I was like, okay, this might be an opportunity. Ding, 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 right? Because
Yes.
as
Yes.
entrepreneurs, you're looking for an opportunity,
Right.
and the opportunities. People always think, oh, the opportunity has to be like some big idea or some new product or AI or something like that. But opportunities come in many forms. And in this case, the opportunity was that I was sitting in a position where I saw this huge demand for work at one particular company.
Mm-hmm.
They would not be able to hire enough people to service it. I connected the dots and said, okay, I'm going to start my own software development firm.
Yes.
I'm going to try to land them as my first client. And, they knew me, right? They knew me
Right.
well. And
Yes.
so it ended up working out. They hired me, um, and they were my first client. And so then within a month, I was hiring my first employee. Within, you know, 6 months, I had 9 people working for me,
Mm-hmm.
all at the Pampered Chef, helping
Yes.
them with their pipeline. And about 9 months into it, we landed our second client. I was like, "Phew, okay, all right."
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
So
You
that.
defeated that single client risk because that's a big risk if you're
Yes,
in consulting. Yes,
it's a
yes.
big risk.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So I felt a lot of pressure, and getting that second client was like, okay, some affirmation that what we're doing is going to be needed out in the marketplace.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. So then the second client, more clients, more employees, you're growing and all of this and moving forward. And then somewhere in there, you and I met. I know you were doing Java, you were doing Rails, you were doing other technologies. JavaScript was out, all of that. You were across the board. And you made a decision to sell the company at some point. Are you comfortable talking about that? I know this is long enough
Yeah,
ago?
absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's fine. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah. Yeah, so actually in 2009, Andrew Mason from Groupon, he he came to Optiva, him and his CTO, they came to Optiva looking for us to validate their software before they launched.
Yes.
Okay, and this was actually, they were called The Point
Yeah.
back then. They weren't even Groupon yet, and so they just
Hmm.
wanted us to look at the software, make sure it wasn't going to just completely crumble when they went live.
Right.
So I didn't hear from him again for about 9 months, and then Andrew Mason called back, and he's like, "Hey, Kevin, things are going great. We really need your help building software." And I'm
Hmm.
like, "Great, the point's really taking off, huh?" He's like, "No, forget the point. We're on to something new called Groupon." And I'm like, "Oh, cool. What's a Groupon?" And so he told me,
Yes.
and next thing you knew, they ended up being our biggest client. They were the
Hmm.
fastest growing company in the history of the world. I mean, it was just this huge tidal wave that we were happy to be caught up in, and so then like a year later, they offered to buy us. That didn't work out, and then like 6 months after that, they I went to them and like, hey, your competitor just bought one of our competitors. Should we talk
Yes.
again? Yeah, and
There
so
was a lot of that going on. It was all over the place.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So and so at that point, it ended up working out. They purchased us. They brought our team over into Groupon engineering, and kind of we
Hmm.
scattered throughout the Groupon engineering, and I think it was really even though the Optiva team uh, was very mixed on the acquisition. There were people who were really against it, people who saw it as an opportunity. I think
Hmm.
for everyone who did decide to go over to Groupon, it ended up being a great move for all of them because they
Mm.
all got stock options, which ended up working out nicely. They got great experience, and frankly, having Groupon on your resume
Hmm.
versus having Optiva on your resume, it just
Yes.
has had so much more brand recognition for all of those folks. And so I was really happy with how that turned out for
Yeah.
everybody.
So everyone had an opportunity to work on bigger problems all throughout and interact with a bigger team. And there's a cross-pollination of knowledge. Everybody's looping up. And there was
Yeah.
something you used to do. Oh, what was the event you used to run? It was like a lunchtime lunch and learn, but you had a name for it. Geek
Yeah,
Fest.
that was Geek Fest.
Geek
Yeah, yeah.
Fest.
Yeah. So that was courtesy of Dave Hoover, who runs
Yes.
Red Squirrel Technologies now.
Yes.
So he was one of my two partners. Tyler Jennings was the other.
Yes.
And yeah, so Dave came up with uh, uh, Geek Fest. So every Wednesday at lunch, we would get
Oh,
everybody together. We'd talk software coding, whatever it was. And so we would bring, so we were often spread out amongst different client sites. We'd bring everybody together, and it was basically like a weekly conference, like a 1 hour conference. So
yeah.
really cool. And we did other things like that. So it was really important for us when we hired people that they weren't just great developers, but they were also people who really wanted to inspire other people to be great software
Hmm.
developers, and people who wanted to mentor and who wanted to go out and give presentations and kind of um, lift up the entire community. Those were the people that we really attracted. And so this was just one of those opportunities for people to practice, yeah, giving presentations, for instance.
Yeah. You see that, and especially as you said, in your partners with Dave Hoover and Tyler Jennings, they're both very big on mentorship and
Yeah.
apprenticeship. Dave wrote a book on it. He got together
Mhm.
with Ade Oshanaye and wrote a book on it. So yeah, just
Absolutely.
wonderful that you're passing the knowledge and sharing the knowledge there. All right.
Yeah, it really the thing that makes me the happiest about the crew that I put together at Optiva is seeing how many of them now um, are um, are either running their own companies, or they're CTOs or senior VPs of engineering out there
Yes,
in the community. So many of them have gone on to really be leaders out in the software community.
it's amazing. It's amazing. So, have you've sold the company? Would you like to tell us about the boat in the Caribbean?
Yeah, so absolutely. Yeah, I could talk about that all day. But yeah, so a year after joining Groupon and kind of integrating the Optiva into Groupon, my family, my wife and two kids, we jumped on a boat in a sailboat in Fort Lauderdale and sailed it around the Bahamas, up the coast of the U.S. up to North Carolina. So it was
Yes.
about 10 months that we spent on the boat there, just
And
bonding as a family.
you homeschooled your kids
Homeschool.
during that
Mhm.
time. That is wonderful. I've often thought about that. That is a classic example. Entrepreneur sees a successful exit, and your thought is, I'm going to make sure I spend more time with my family. That's beautiful.
It was, yeah, it was really needed, right? Because, I mean, listen, the honest answers that entrepreneurship is really hard, not just on the entrepreneur, but on the entire family, right? It's
Right.
just it is what it is. And after so many years of building a company and making sacrifices, both you and your family, I just saw this as an opportunity to really help rebuild those bonds. And yeah, best decision we could have made as parents. So super happy about the results of that. And I mean, it was a bucket list item, but also you know, my daughter, who's 24 now, wrote her college essays about, you know, her experiences on that trip. And
Oh,
you know, so it has had long-term positive impacts.
yeah. Excellent. So today you are a professor at Stetson University. And you've gone from being in the field, in the trenches, actually, you know, I'll mix metaphors. You're carrying the football down the field, or you're in the trenches, all of that, mix the metaphors, to now, I wouldn't say that you're in the ivory tower. I don't see you as an ivory tower person. You're someone who's been on the field, who is perhaps in a position to analyze what other people are doing on the field now and help them to be more effective. Would that be a fair statement, or would you express that in a different way?
No, I think I think that's fair. Yeah, I'm very connected to the practitioners, the people who are out there building companies or who want to build companies, who kind of aspire to that. You
Mm-hmm.
know, as we all know, there are a lot of entrepreneurship professors who have never worked at a startup, much less launched a startup, right, or a
Yes, yeah.
company, right? So it's really theoretical knowledge, and so I appreciate theoretical knowledge, and I, you know, I'm publishing papers and stuff in academic journals, but you know, I really try to focus my energies on, you know, how do we use all this theory and how do we use this scientific knowledge that professors are creating in different fields from psychology, computer science, economics? How do we combine these and use them in a way that helps people
Mm-hmm.
successfully launch companies, right? And in my particular case, how do we do that in a way that they can maintain their mental health, right? So that they can
Yes.
not lose their families or lose, you know, kind of the bigger vision they have for themselves and how they're going to impact the world. So that's where a lot of my academic work comes in, is
Yes.
around uh, the emotional and mental health toll
Mm-hmm.
that entrepreneurs deal with.
Where would someone read about what you're doing or hear more about what you're doing? Because everyone's talking about how entrepreneurs push, 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 go, 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 achieve, achieve, achieve. You're looking at it from the viewpoint of, yes, achieve, but maintain your mental health and maintain your
Yeah.
connection with your family, and maintain your humanity even. Where could someone learn more about what, how you're doing that in your research? Yeah, well,
Hmm. Yeah,
what?
yeah. So I publish in academic journals, which are kind of like not something most people would want to read. But what I
Mhm.
also try to do is write articles either on my website or in uh, different websites that publish for entrepreneurs, where I kind of try to distill not just what I'm writing, but what other people are researching and writing about. So in ways that they can be consumed. But I would recommend my website, founderscholar.com. So
Mhm.
I have a blog there where I post, you know, links to stuff that might be more helpful. Yeah, so I'd recommend people go there, or you know, follow my Twitter or X.com
I still call
account.
it Twitter. It's Twitter.
Twitter, okay, good. Twitter,
Sears Tower,
yes,
Comiskey Park, Twitter.
yeah. Some things just will never, yeah, will never
Yes,
be
right.
renamed. We
Yes.
refuse. Yes. So on Twitter, I'm K Taylor. So
Okay.
I would send people to either of those.
Yes, wonderful.
Mhm.
We are coming towards the end of our time together. I could ask you questions on, and that's what we've done in our conversations too when we get together for lunch or whatever. So I could ask you so much more, but we want to make sure we respect the time, your time, the time of our audience, everyone across the board. As we wrap up, you've already told us how we can learn more about what you're doing. Go to founderscholar.com or follow you on Twitter at K Taylor. Is there anything in particular you would like to share with our audience? Anything that I haven't covered that you want to make sure our audience is aware of?
Um, so what I would say, so the one piece of advice, well, I have two things that I really like to share with people who are starting their journey in entrepreneurship.
Mm-hmm.
One thing I'll challenge people is um, if you're launching your business, how can you do that in a way that does not require angel investment, does not require venture capital, does not require outside investment?
Mm-hmm.
Um, people especially driven by the media, they tend to celebrate raising capital instead
Mm.
of celebrating building a successful company, right?
Mm.
And so there's so many businesses out there, like businesses that you've built, right? Businesses that I've built, where you can have a thriving, profitable business that's helping customers, employing people, um, providing a nest egg for the owner of the company, and they've never taken any outside capital, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'll really challenge people: how can you build your business without taking any outside capital, right? And you may at some point be like, I have to take outside capital. Here's why, right? So come from it from the angle of how do I not take it instead of how do I go get capital, right? Because once you convince yourself you have to have it, there's no other way. Okay, then it makes sense. That's what that private equity or venture capital is for. It's for certain businesses that have to have this capital injection. Everybody else, just go build your business, right? Don't worry about what's going on in Silicon Valley or
Right.
at the angel groups. The second piece of advice, or kind of, yeah, I guess it's advice, or really an experience share too, is very early in your business, build out your org chart, okay, for where you're going to be in 5 years. Okay, and I got
Mm.
this from a book called The E-Myth Revisited, which is the
Yes.
number one book that I recommend to people. It's a horrible name, like what the E-Myth?
Yeah,
What is
yes.
that? But The E-Myth Revisited, one of the best practical books for people who have a business and are just starting to kind of grow it beyond themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Build an org, even if it's just you and you build out an org chart and your Ray Hightower is in every single box,
Mm-hmm.
that's okay, right? If you're the only person in the company, you're going to be in every box. But
Right.
knowing the boxes that have to exist to get your company to where you want it to be in 5 years, then allows you, when you have the opportunity, to start hiring people and putting other names into those boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a very kind of premeditated way, right? So you're very intentional about why you're hiring someone and what box or boxes are they going to fill as your
Right.
organization grows.
That's solid advice. Number one, build your business as if you're not going to get an outside investor, because ideally, if you have a successful business, the money your customers pay you is going to finance your growth, right? That's the ideally
Right.
way you want to be. And number two, immerse yourself in E-Myth and figure out what boxes are necessary to run your enterprise and figure out who's in each box even if that name is always you as the solo entrepreneur, you need to know that the boxes exist so you know what boxes you need to fill in when you start hiring people. Wow, excellent advice. Dr. Kevin Taylor, it has been a pleasure having you here on the ROI Clear podcast. This is Kevin, I always enjoy you. This is good. Thank you for this today.
Thanks, Ray. Really appreciate the opportunity to come talk to you.
Thank you for engaging the ROI Clear podcast. At ROI Clear, we buy multifamily apartment properties, we improve them, and we give people a great place to live. At the same time, we give investors an opportunity to enjoy capital preservation, tax advantages, and a solid return on investment. If you'd like to know more, click the link to roiclear.com down below. We look forward to speaking with you.